Montana Office of Public Instruction, Indian Education for All's Indian Boarding Schools from History to Healing webinar series. My name is Jennifer Statham, and I am an Indian Education for All implementation specialist. We are so glad that you have joined us this evening. And Kevin has an incredible presentation in store for us. You will notice that you are on mute and your cameras are off because we are recording this for future use. And please feel free to use the chat. If there are questions that come up, I will try to find good times to let Kevin know there's great questions, and we'll have a question and answer period at the end. Please make sure to put your name in the chat as roll call, and also on the sign-in sheet. The sign-in sheet is only if you need renewal units. However, at the end of the webinar, we will have a feedback form. Please, please, please use this. You have to use it if you need renewal units, but if you aren't seeking renewal units, please fill it out anyway, as your feedback made this webinar possible. And we are now planning a sovereignty webinar series to begin in November. And that is all because of your feedback and what has been requested the most. So, before I introduce tonight's presenter, I do wish to acknowledge the sensitivity of the topic and that it may be a potential trigger for some who may have prior trauma. Please do take good care of yourself as you process this information, and reach out should you feel you need any resources to help you with your process. So Kevin Kicking Woman is an enrolled tribal member at the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. He also has Cree ancestry. He has his Title VII teaching certification, and meaning he is a qualified Blackfeet language teacher. He earned his bachelor's degree in Native American Studies and Anthropology. He graduated from the University of Montana in 2014 with a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus in cultural anthropology and music. Kevin has dedicated his career to teaching, learning, and sharing cultural knowledge. He has experience in radio broadcasting to teaching students in kindergarten through high school. He began working with the Bridges program at the University of Montana, assisting students on their path to a baccalaureate degree in 2011. And next, he began working for the Cobell Land and Culture Institute in the College of Humanities and Science. Today, Kevin teaches Blackfeet language and culture at his alma mater, Browning High School. Kevin, thank you so much for your flexibility and using your phone for this, and take it away.
Well, thank you. Okiniksuquex. Okinitaniku ki nitaya pitins kasin ki suikaxin. Do amskapit pikani. Nina anesta awak gyawani ki niksista anesta chistukumpuka. Nach si sinaki ki. Isto anakok amskapi pikani. Again, my name's Kevin. My Indian name's Ki, and I come from the Thunderchild, Kicking Woman, Calf Robe, and Tail Feather side. And it's good to introduce yourself, and it's good to be here and talk about this topic, which is really deep to me, and what I want to talk about today. When I think back about how boarding schools has affected our people, I'm a product of that because of my mother and father. And my mom was born in 1926, and my dad was in 1936. And they had went to the boarding schools, and they suffered from alcoholism a lot, and affected my brother and I. And so I wrote a story one time. I was sitting at the University of Montana when I was working for the Bridges of Baccalaureate. And I've had all this trauma all my life, kind of kept it together. I fought myself through alcoholism and a lot of things that bothered me, and a lot of people. I kind of had a tough time in life in my younger years after the military, and even before the military, because I didn't know how to deal with the trauma I had brought on me. And a lot of it was due to the boarding school and a lot of the foster homes that I was in, and so on. So I wrote a story. I was sitting at the University of Montana, and I began to talk into a tape, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was going to write a book called Son is My Witness. And the reason for that, Son is My Witness, the title is because, when you get severely abused, I used to go outside in a little place called Star School, the community, and I would sit in back in the morning and wait for the sun to rise, sneak outside and sit in the back porch there. And when the sun rised, I knew I made it one more day, and I'd watch it set. So I named this The Sun is My Witness. And when I sat down, William Yellow Robe was a good friend of mine. He came through and I showed him what I was writing. He said, let's do this into a play. And the first time I ever did it was for the colony. And, you know, I was a writer, a prolific writer and stuff, and anything like that. So they had it at the University of Montana, and they only had 5 writers from the United States come. And I was really nervous. I was so nervous. And, but I did the play, and I'm going to just talk from my heart how I wrote the words. This is my words speaking about how I grew up through foster homes. It's very, it's a tough read. There's certain parts that tough for me to get through, especially when I talk about my father and my brother, and go from there. But I want to say a prayer first before we get started, and sing a song before we go. I step at the pio, opposite duki, not to eat the pigs, spumit the pigs. So eat the pigs, meet the pigs. I do get enough shiskana, duni spumo, kit spumo, kinan. Nach say streets and a nach say a gaki mats and a nach say ikimuts and nach kukumatots and a nach gawa to eat ducks and a spumo kin nach kunits and an itzitapia pikin itziboxen. Gimo kin a nach not to east the toots, nina ninunix, kinix, sister ninunix, sinach, season ninix, nitzitapimix, gimiscokus, ixikimetap, sia. Ixokapi tamapi na bata piece na nikitchkinipin na nichiboxen. Gamotan ken hai all sorts of life creator, holy beings, celestial beings, water beings, earth beings, hear me on this day. Help us, help me as we all listen and we try hard. Pity us to be truthful and spiritual. Help us as we may know our native ways in the Blackfoot language and other languages. Pity us, bless them, our families, our children, our mothers, grandfathers, our dads. Bless them today. Pity your children, they're always in need. Pity them, have pity on them for safety, so we may raise them correctly for a long life. This is what I pray for. So the story I'm going to talk about with you guys today, let it help you. Sometimes I know that these stories are hard to hear and trauma and whatnot, but I always tell people, and I love working where I'm at with students because of the story I have, and I can relate. And so often our kids are all traumatized and they're walking in this world. But Narcissus Blood said something one time, the late Narcissus Blood, he said, a lot of people will tell you, just get over it. Why don't you guys just get over it? And I like his answer to that when he said, because I couldn't answer that question. And when he said, ceremonies are like our trauma of the past. He said, we need our ceremonies from our past to heal in the present so we can move on to the future. And that's what trauma is. We need to reach out into your ceremonies or whatever you believe in and to heal. And that is so powerful to me. Use your songs, your language, and so forth. And in this play, I sing some songs as we go along because I try to keep the songs that when I was a child, I would sing to help me through the day. And so this is called The Sun Is My Witness, and I got published through Yellow Medicine Review. And so I'm going to read the story and we'll go from there and leave about 10 minutes for some questions and so forth. All right. So thank you guys for coming. It means a lot to me. And may the Creator bless all your guys' trail, your journey, and you at your home fires with your family. So I was 8 or 9 years old at the time, living in the flood home with my Aunt Aggie. There were 6 or more people of us living in that house. One day, my Aunt Aggie asked me to go find something like tweezers for her in the closet, but I couldn't find what she wanted. She was yelling and screaming, and I was nervous and in a rush. And it seems like you can't find anything when you feel like that because your mind isn't on it. I was standing there by the closet, and strangely, I was on my knees, not having any recollection of how I got there. Getting up from the floor, I saw a hard-heeled platform shoe lying there. When I got up to my feet, I reached the back of my head and I realized that she had thrown a shoe at me. It had hit me in the head. It had it had hit me and knocked me out. All she said was, and said to me in a different voice, "You stay in here, you little fucker." And as I walked out, I sat at the edge of the bed in the room and I began to cry. Everything I had been through up at that point came to flooding into my awareness. All the abuse and my feelings about it just came to a head in the moment. I was sitting there planning I wanted to go kill her than myself. While I was sitting there and thinking about it, this really warm feeling just came into my body and these words seemed to enter my mind. Look into your heart. There's a fire burning. Don't let it go out. I always said that was the creator talking to me. Right then and there, I got this really good feeling. I stood up and I began to realize they couldn't hurt me anymore because I wasn't going to let that fire go out. From then on, they could hurt me, beat me, whatever. It didn't matter because I wasn't going to let that fire go out. I had cried so much, I couldn't give any more to them. There were times when I cried alone, but never in front of them. I didn't want to show them my tears. I realized the more I cried, it satisfied them. When I stopped crying, they didn't know what to do, and they would just look at me, and they wouldn't know what to do anymore. They could hit me, but I refused to give them tears. So they didn't get the satisfaction from it. Mentally and emotionally, I closed them out. They could abuse me. They could abuse me physically or emotionally, but they could no longer break me. Perhaps you should start at the beginning. I was born June 25th, 1967. I have a brother that's 2 years older than me. He went through some similar stuff with me, but perhaps not as deep. In fact, I think sometimes he almost feels guilty because of what I had to go through. My dad met my mom, Caroline Thunderchild, was her name, in Alberta, Canada. It was a little town in Lethbridge where they met. She moved down here with my dad, leaving 13 kids up in Canada when she met him. My mom had 16 kids altogether. My dad had us three, my two brothers and I. My dad was trying to raise me when I was about six months old, but he was an alcoholic. He tried to do whatever he needed to do and get done, but he drank a lot. I don't know if it's just because his parenting skills, because of his boarding school days, or what. He told me a lot of things about that. I don't know too much about it. My dad left me with my aunts and uncles to be taken care of. But I always wondered about that. I thought, why? How could you just leave your kids like that? They were the loves of your life, because I have kids now and I feel that. As I've grown older, I have come to hate some of the things he did. Not him, but a lot of the things he did. I feel he should have loved us more. At 6 months old, I was in the care of Greasy and Floyd Takesgun for a while. To this day, they still claim me as their son. Then I went back to the other people, but I don't remember too much about it. I was too young, maybe 2 or 3, and stayed there about 2 more years. Then I was about 4 or 5 years old. I moved with this family called the Lakes family, Rainy and Sleepy Lakes, who had several kids. I can remember them feeding me. I remember them putting me in this high chair, and I want to say it was a high chair, but I was unsure if it was. I remember because they would be laughing, putting hot peppers in front of me and making me eat them. I can remember there was this one guy standing there pissing in a cup, and he would make me drink his piss. I used to have a nightmare all the time of looking up into this hole in the bottom of the cupboard. This hole had a rope in it. Years later, I went back and looked up beneath the cupboard and remembered that's where they were hanging me. I remember screaming. They would put a knot at one end of the rope and put it to the other end with the noose down into the hole. They would hang me from it and watch me and laugh. Then they'd lift me up till I got air into my lungs, and they would do it again. The last thing I remember with them, I don't know if they gave it to me or gave it to me. I just found it Drano or Lysol. I was about five when I drank this stuff. I was actually left for dead. If it wasn't for a gentleman named Kenneth Olperson and his wife, who were friends of these two people who were raising me, I would have certainly died. They came down and saw me through the screen door lying on the floor, so they grabbed me and rushed me to the hospital. To this day, I have trouble swallowing. If I die of natural causes, it will be because my esophagus was so badly burned by that experience that every 2 or 3 years, I have to go in and get an endoscopy. I feel like closing a lot. And when it's coming on, the doctors have to, when it does fail, the doctors will have to transfer my intestine to my esophagus. And then it has to accept it and all that. I wound up going to Seattle Hospital. I was there for 2 years. When I finally went home, it was crazy. I remember this brown bag. I used to carry this brown bag everywhere. And this individual would pick me up. I didn't know who he was. I was a kid. I remember this great big X and O's things that I would be playing in Seattle with this beanbag. And this guy would always do this with me. Anyhow, about 6 or 7 years ago, I checked my email, even though it generally never opens something I don't recognize because I think it might be spam. But there was a message that said, long lost friend. I thought, well, I'm going to open it. It says long lost friend. I'm going to open it. It was a gentleman named Gerald Bennett. He said, you don't know me, but I used to pick you up in the hospital when you were young. When you were young and you were there for your esophagus. I used to take you home every week, and everywhere I'd take you as my son. He said he said he has pictures of me and I'm still waiting for him. He said you used to come and look so cute when you used to always carry your little brown bag with you. I knew that's where those memories come from. I correspond with him still today. I got back when I was about 6 or 7 years old from Seattle. I used to have to put food in a blender because if I didn't, the food would get stuck in my throat and it'd be hard to swallow. And then I would always have to go into the hospital and get it dislodged. It seemed like I was always going to the hospital, even to this day. When eating with my family, I occasionally have to excuse myself and go to the bathroom to dislodge the food from my throat. Sometimes it's difficult to deal with because it gets swelled up and I can't swallow. Today, when I look back at pictures of me from the past, I just remember how lonely I was. Things are crazy. I don't know if people know what it is to be scared every day, but I was. I never knew what was coming next. When they called me to go clean, I went and cleaned. I cleaned every day. I swept, mopped everything. By the time I was 7, they had me chopping kindling and wood, and they would call me to put wood on the fire all night long. I knew I'd get in trouble if I didn't. I knew to go get firewood when they would hear them call me Irvin. It meant to get up and put wood on the fire. When I slept, my uncle would periodically come in and smut me under the nose to wake me up. I don't know why he did this, but that's what he'd always do. I'm a light sleeper and wake up right when I feel somebody else's presence in the room. When walking by my aunt, if I made her cold or made a breeze from walking too fast, I'd get slapped. She would say, you don't get me cold. I hated tweezers. I knew what she wanted. When she wanted tweezers, I had to go digging for gray hair. Gray hair. She didn't like gray hair, so she would have me sit there and search for gray hair for hours on end and pluck them out. And if I found any, I remember there were times I would be falling asleep and I'd just be moving my hands on her head to make it feel like I was looking for gray hair. I remember there were occasions when I would have to rub lotion on her feet into the wee hours of the night if she wanted to stay up late. I had to play cards with her. I hate rummy to this day. We played what we called 500, and that was pretty good. There were times when I would win a game just to beat her at something, but I had to let her win too. I remember I'd be so tired, but if I showed it, she would reach across the table and slap me in the face and say, wake up. She would say, I was tired because I never had good night's sleeps. I was always keeping the fire going all night and cleaning all day, every day. If they needed anything, I was the one who did it. They would say, get me water. I'd go get them water. I was the TV remote, and they would make me sit there and be at their beck and call. Yeah. The loving touches I received from my dad. I really loved my dad. My dad would come home and I would hug him. and I would hug him. But if I got caught hugging my dad, I got beat. They say, get away from him. That ain't, you're no baby, or that isn't your fucking dad. Get away from him. You're a bastard. I loved my dad and he loved us, but he didn't have the skills sometimes. Sometimes now I wonder why he didn't just bear down and raise us. My brother and my dad and I had stayed in this one room and slept together on this one bed because that's all we had. In fact, I slept with my brother until he was gone when he was 14 years old. When others weren't watching, my dad would always hug us and he would say, love you, my boy, or love you, my boys. Or he'd say little things like, Daddy loves you. I'd ask, Dad, tell me a story. And he would tell me stories about a long time ago and the things he used to do and so on. In those nights, when we were in our room, we couldn't really talk. There were times when I was literally up all night listening to my dad, up until I was about 14 years old, when my dad would come home and get delirium tremors or DTs because he would have any alcohol. Excuse me. Hey, sorry guys. Delirium tremors and DTs because he wouldn't have any alcohol. I used to have to watch him when he got up. When he had DTs, I knew just what to do. Dad would start shaking and on the floor and going stiff on the floor. He would start seeing things and stuff. I used to carry a spoon and put it in his mouth because I didn't want him to swallow his tongue. I knew not to let him grab me. I stayed far enough away, and because he would be shaking and sweating. When he would come out of it, I would say, my boy, he would say, my boy, I'm sorry. I'd ask, Dad, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be all right? You going to be all right? Then he would slip into another DTs. We didn't have much. We didn't have anything for Easter one time. And I remember my dad showed up half shot, half drunk with Easter baskets. We weren't allowed to have candy. In fact, they would lock up all their candy or anything of sweetness, oranges, apples, you name it, whatever they had, they would lock it up. We couldn't have it, or at least I couldn't. On certain occasions, my dad used to come home late at night from Browning and walk to Star School 7 miles away. And around about 11 o'clock at night, or even 1 in the morning, we would be asleep and he would tap on the window. We would open it. He'd give us a bag of candy so we can ration it to each other. Now, my mother, I didn't know, but in school, when I was in the lunch line, people knew her. And they would always say, well, you just look like your mother. I never knew her, but there was this tan purse I cherished because she wrote all these letters to my dad and they were there. She asked us about how we were doing and things like that and all that kind of stuff. It was really weird though, because the purse was my only connection to my mom. I used to always wonder what happened to her. In fact, when I was in that Seattle hospital, she missed seeing me by an hour. I guess that's where she was. But see what I thought, she was dead. She told me years later, the nurse told her there's a Kicking Woman kid downstairs, and she said, they asked them who, and she said, Kevin. And she said, oh, that's my son. The nurse went down to get me, but I had gone back to Browning, and they had to go back to her and let her know I was gone home. But when I was a kid, I didn't know too much about my mother's side. I grew up I grew up with a bunch of Blackfeet, but I'm half Cree and half Blackfeet. But Blackfeet peoples didn't like Crees. So to them, I was a sturdy Cree. Our next door neighbor, Pat Kennedy, was from Little Pine, Saskatchewan. I think my mother was from Thunderchild, Saskatchewan, and he knew my mom. Pat would always say we were related. I don't know if we were or not, but that was kind of my connection to the Cree side. Pat was a really good singer. It's always a big thing for me. I don't know when and where I learned to sing, but when I got beaten or sent to my room, or during some of the loneliest times in my life and the happiest times too, I would sit and sing, and it would be a big part of my life. I still sing today. Hey, Aya, eh, no, hey, ah, hey. Aya, hey, da, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, songs has always been with me. People ask me, when did you learn? I don't know. It's always been there. When you look at great singers, now I'm not saying I'm a great singer, but when you look at it, Native people are all sensitive musicians, songwriters, singers, and song people. I think I think to have good singers, you have to go through some kind of hurt, something. Some people ask, why are you such a good singer? And I think maybe it's because I can go back and feel songs through all the pain I've been through. It's like the blues. I go back in my mind and I sing it out. Music always allows me to express feelings inside that I cannot express in other ways. It frees me up inside. It's healing. There are happy songs and there are sad songs, but in the worst of times, songs get me through, can get you through anything. Songs were a steady pace in my world. I grew up with my aunts and uncles. While they hurt me a lot, I was a kid growing. I was a kid growing up. It's kind of crazy, you know. I don't want to bring hurt upon them telling my story. I just I just need to tell my story. I am concerned that a lot of people will bring judgment upon them. And they are old now. It's tough one. It is a tough one for me whether to include their real identities or not, because I don't want to cause harm to them. Even so, I need to get my story out. Sometimes I think, well, the hell with them. They did this to me. But the soft side of me says, no, you will just cause pain and recreate all the hurt again. I think I just need to tell a story and I need to get it out. But I don't want to cause harm to them or hurt them. But when I was a kid, telling my story will help me heal in the present from being when I was a child. On July 8th, 1964, Swift Dam ruptured and a wall of water swept across Montana, displacing some and killing many others. The water was not discriminatory. It took its path and carved a landscape. Everyone I knew lived in this little valley, what everyone called the bottoms of Star School. But in 1964, when the flood came through, everyone had to move up to the top of the hill, a little place called Star School. That's where I lived on the Blackfeet Reservation, about 8 miles northwest of Browning. After the floods came through, the government housing went up on the hill and flood homes. There were only about 200 people in that community living in Star School. Everyone used to go play at the bottoms because there was a lot of brush down there and the beaver dams and the trails, and we all knew it like the back of our hand. There is a river down there called Big River, but others may know it by another name. We had to go into town to get the mail from mail in Browning from the post office. But there was a school out there called Star School. It was given by a gentleman named George Starr. He donated the land which it was built upon. I attended kindergarten through 4th grade at Star School. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. And one of my favorite teachers was Miss Kennerly. But it was the flood house that stands out to me. It was always cold. We heated and cooked with firewood and from a wood stove. I never touched a thermostat till I was in my teens. We bought our firewood, though money was scarce. Sometimes we went out and got it ourselves when I was a little older. I used to be collecting firewood out in the brush. It would always be so damn cold. I don't know if people know what it is, what it was living. The people I was living with at the time knew how to chop wood or firewood, but I was the one doing it. When we would harvest, we would go hunt, or sometimes we'd go to town to buy food, but sometimes we would hunt and share it with the other community members. There were 6 or 7 in our household at the time, and we had to make it through a month on $350 in food stamps. Nobody worked. I always wonder how we made it through because of utilities and other expenses. I remember we used to eat a lot of macaronis, and I hate macaronis today today, and I will not eat them. I constantly had to eat those, and I didn't like them. Because of this, when I went to other people's nice houses and I saw them cooking, I used to call it fancy cooking. I never really knew what it was, what were really good cooked food was. Ours was always basic. We had a lot of our own commodities, and we ate a lot of bannock bread for most every night, and I love bannock. All these adults drink it. All the adults drink alcohol except for one. She was probably the meanest, even though she didn't drink. No one I lived with graduated from high school. And jobs were scarce. Finding work was hard, but most importantly, I don't know if they even wanted to work. I only know that they didn't. I only know they didn't. I never heard them talk about going look for work. So this probably tells me that they didn't care to work. My dad was always away a lot and would come back about every 2 or 3 months. I didn't know if it was just to see me or my brothers, or to say hi to his kids, or to say hi to the relatives we were staying with. He would stay a week, and even then I could see that he had a certain way about him. I could tell when he wanted to go get drunk again. I could see the itch. I guess. I remember walking with him out into the flats out Star School, and I'd be holding the back of his pocket, and I would tell Dad, quit drinking. Dad, quit drinking. His voice was soft and wistful, and he would say, yeah, my boy, I'm done. But I knew better, and sure enough, he would be gone another 2 or 3 months. And I remember I was frightened of one of my dad's relatives because he would come home and literally beat me. I remember many occasions he would make me stand there in front of him and stand there and hold my arms to my sides. Then he would hit me as hard as he could. He would say, if you move or flinch, I'm going to hit you again. So I just stood there and then I took it. I remember on one occasion, particularly around Kalispell Fair, time in around August, I must have been around 10 years old. The reason I know this because they would take us kids to Kalispell, and I was due to go this time. The JOM Johnson O'Malley program and Lloyd Littlebloom and Harold Dussel would be taking us kids up there, and I was one of them to go that day. But on this day, it was a nice enough day around 6 that evening. I seen this car pull up in front of the house, and it was one of the relatives getting off, and I just knew he was drunk. So I got so scared. I was scared, and my back of my neck, my back of my back felt thick. I was trapped and I didn't know what to do. So I ran and I took off through the back door. Now I never used to take off out of that house. I was stuck in that house. I remember I wasn't even allowed to go outside. Still I ran. I took the route about 3 houses above where I stayed on that street. I saw a corral tucked in back, so I grabbed this lariat. I thought, well, I'm not going back. I'm not going back, so I'm going to take it. I'll get beat if I do. So I walked up onto this place above the beaver dams, Bear Medicines, they called it. Used to live across the road. And on top of that hill was a bunch of choke cherries. I found this plastic bag, turned it inside out, and I picked berries. I thought, well, I'm not going to go back, so I'm going to have to survive with these berries for the whole day. I was young and I didn't have a clue what was going on. So I walked about 7 miles down to the bottom, and I realized it was getting dark. So I thought I better get back. It's getting dark. And I was going through the bottoms, but the people were already looking for me. It must have been about 12 midnight, maybe later. And I was walking through the brush. People were calling my name, and I'd hear them coming. So I'd lay in the brush out of sight until they were passed. Eventually I made it all the way to the house next door, Pat Kennedy's, a really good guy and a good singer. Then I crawled underneath a trailer house because I thought it was cold. It didn't take long, and I saw this tarp under the trailer. I didn't know what was in it or anything, so I just rolled up in it and I fell asleep. I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden, this bright light is in my face. It was Delano Bear Medicine. There were cops and everyone looking for me. Delano called out, "Here he is." So I crawled out all the way to the end of the trailer, and I stood stood up in the corner by the trailer, but everyone must have thought I ran out to the flats again and took off. But they were just all running by me. I thought, wow, there's a lot of people looking for me. And all of a sudden I realized I'm caught. What am I going to do? All I said is, "Here I am." KJ Bear Medicine turned around and looked at me. I'm not sure if he even knew what to do. He had this scared look in his eyes. He was about 6 years older than me at that time. Now my dad, it was the first time that ever seen my dad stand up and grab me, and he was crying and holding me, thanking me that I was alive. And he took me into the house where my aunts and uncles were. Boy, when he left that night, did I ever get beat, because I almost let the cat out the bag. See, everyone out there knew I was abused. Everyone wanted to know, why did he take off? I didn't get to go to the fair the next day, but I got beat that night. And my actions damn near exposed their abuse of me. That's the question people asked, was why did he run? The people I lived with called me a little son of a bitch and made sure that I did not ever do that again by beating me. I was only 10 years old. I didn't know that running away would get them in trouble. I didn't know any better. I was just trying to survive in a closed community. People kind of knew and suspected, but no one ever did anything about it. When my uncle would go on drunks or come home that way, come home, that's when they would know. People would know because I would have to go door to door bumming sandwiches for him when he was drunk. He'd say to me, go up to so-and-so and get me a sandwich. So I literally had to go bum sandwiches. There was a guy named Daryl, and Johnny would make a sandwich and say, hurry up and make it because he's going to get beat when he gets home. They made me a sandwich and I would take it directly to my uncle. I didn't find out about my 13 brothers and sisters until I was in my 30s. Then after I got out the Navy, or when I saw my dad, or when I was in the military or joining Navy, or when I saw my dad, it still pisses me off today when I saw my dad died. What kid has to see their mom and dad die right in front of their eyes? I saw both mine die. And that really bothers me. That really hurts me. I was 14 and I was with the last family that adopted me. Really good people. I was coming from Bozeman, Powell in May of 1983, going to Star School off to one side of the church called Lockley Bremerner's Church, kind of a holy roller type. Anyhow, we were heading up towards Star School, and all of a sudden there was this ambulance all up ahead of me on the road with a line of cars being held up. I was 14, and of course I had to get out and go up there and get nosy. Then when I got up there, it was my dad lying in the ditch. He had got hit by a car walking on that road. Walking on the road. So I can remember going to Star School and calling into the hospital and asking, how is my dad? How is he? They would said he was stable. I told the people I was staying with at the time to bring me into town. So we went into the hospital. I remember standing outside the emergency room, and all of a sudden there's this green cloth. When I looked into the room, I saw my dad had this green cloth over his face, and I could see his profile. And I could hear the radio talk going back and forth to chatter. A helicopter is going to fly him out into Kalispell. I could hear the helicopters getting close. Helicopter will be there in 5 minutes. Then all of a sudden I heard from the RN, Lois has expired. The hurt was overpowering. Wow, I can remember to this day. I didn't cry in front of them because my aunts and uncles were there, and my family who would come to adopt me were standing in the hospital with me. So we were leaving that night, and I had seen the guy that ran over my dad and killed him. I was hurting. I remember Elmer Fitzgerald, the people I was living with, was a really good man. And he turned around and he said, Irvin, your dad has died, but I am your dad now. That meant a lot to me. It meant so much to me. So when I got home, he and his wife were sitting up with me. My dad had been everything to me. Seeing him drunk on the streets or whatever, it didn't matter. He was my dad. He was the only one that ever showed me true love. I remember going into the bathroom that night, and when you shut the door, and the light off, it's pitch dark. So I went in there and I said, all right, Jesus, our God, when I turn this light off and I turn it back on, my dad better be standing behind me. So I turned the light off and I cried and I cried. I just put my hand on the switch and I said, Jesus, I'm going to turn this light on again, and I want my dad here. Not there. I didn't turn it off. Not there. I didn't I'd turn it off and say, if you're real God, you're going to give me my dad back. I turned the light on, not there. I remember sitting in a room and I was just crying. I was full of tears that wouldn't stop. So I went out and I sat with Ruth and Almer, the people, and they stayed up all night talking to me. They were good people, and they were good peoples, and I always said what good people they are. Ruth and Almer sat with me all night and they talked with me. With my mother, I saw her dying. It was a whole different thing. In fact, they called me called me and said she was dying, and they wanted me to meet her. When I went up there to see her, she was sitting up and talking up there in Saskatchewan hospital. But then she went into a coma. I had a lot to say to her, and I was sad. It was sad because I only knew her by the count of my hand about maybe 5 days. But that day I looked up at her. I was the only one in the ICU room with her. All my brothers and sisters were gone. She had a little white teddy bear on her, and I began talking to her. She had a tube in her mouth and stuff like that. I said, you know, Mom, I love you. Will you do me one favor? When you go to heaven, can you tell my dad hi? And I want to let you know that I forgive you. This little tear trickled down from her eye. I said, do you hear me? Show me if you hear me. She jumped and I was like, whoa, Mom. I said, don't scare me like that. Just tell me. And I laughed. We had these little rooms we were staying in Saskatchewan hospital. When they said, you better come down here, your mom is starting to pass on and cross over. So I went down there, and sure enough, the family had agreed they were going to end her life support. They were having this discussion, talking in Cree, and one of my brothers said, hey, we don't need to talk in Cree. We have a brother here that doesn't speak Cree. We need to speak so he can understand. So they made the decision, and we went into the room. I remember looking up at the heart monitor and watching the heart rate dropping until there was nothing. She was gone. I sat there and thought, wow, this isn't right. I took the teddy bear off her and I said to them, this is all I want, because that's the only thing that my mother had touched. I knew my mom for maybe 4 or 5 days. So in honor of her, I didn't go to sleep the whole time while she had her funeral. So I stayed up 4 days and 4 nights at her wake, and I didn't sleep once. That was my dedication to her. You know, she was my mom. In the Blackfeet ways, growing up, I was taught a lot. My upbringing was abusive and very lonely, but I always learned a lot about the Blackfeet spirituality. Back when I was a young kid, there was always singing, and we went to a lot of jump dances or giveaways. There was a lot of singing from my next door neighbor, Pat Kennedy. I remember kids would go out and play, and I would have to stay in. And all these older people, I remember looking up at old elders like Paul Minnie Hides, John Bemerson. They would be smoking their pipes and doing holy smokes. They would all be praying, and they would be singing songs. I'd be sitting there watching. And then when they would sing, I would sing with them. I remember going over Star School to a lady named Amy Whitegrass Place, watching them do these blacktail dances. I don't have a complete understanding of them, but I remember they would dance with these bells and pray. I went to bundle openings and watched from afar, being there, being a singer. Being a singer is important because almost in everything Blackfeet does require song. Song attached me to ceremony, and growing up, that was my link. I remember Alvin coming to school, and if I got a referral, and I didn't know when I would get one, but Alvin would put the fear in me. Sometimes in school, if if you didn't hand in a homework or something like that, they would send a referral home. I remember one time sitting there in Miss Clark's class and looking back to see him. He had this look on his face. I remember being so pissing scared that something was wrong. I got chills down my back. He never came, only when something was wrong or when I was in class. And sure enough, when I went home that night, he asked me why I'd got a referral in that class and why I wasn't doing my homework. I got the shit beat out of me. He was ruthless. One time my brother didn't get home on the bus from Browning 7 miles away for a little place, Star School. So when I got home and I walked into the room where my brother and I slept, and where I got knocked out from my aunt's shoe, my brother was waiting in there, and I asked, "Why didn't you get on the bus?" He got up, he could barely move, and he said, "Look, brother." He pulled up his shirt and he had bruises the size of my fist all over his body. I asked, "What happened?" And he told me that Alvin had beat him with a 2x4 because they thought he was talking about them at school. It was one of those things, shut the kids up before they find out what was happening to us. They would put the fear of life in us. I just remember I just cried because he had bruises from head to toe. The only reason Alvin quit beating us was because when he hit him in the head with the 2x4, he started bleeding. It was because he drew blood that he figured he better quit. I always remember that day when my brother got beat pretty bad. When I think about Star School, they had a big old green log house school. They only went up to 4th grade, and the schoolhouse was torn down later. After 4th grade, you went into Browning for 5th grade on up. Many of those years are sharp in my memory, and other stories told about what happened to me in my life, like knowing whether the Drano or Lysol had almost killed me, or if it was just found. From what I hear is they gave it to me. But anyhow, the school out there was a fun place because I got to go play with my classmates. It was fun in that little community of Star School when I was at school with those kids. I remember having straight A's for the first years. But when I got up to about 3rd or 4th grade, right around there, and it was later when we started to go into Browning School, I just quit trying because if I did any better than my aunt's baby, I got beat. If I played basketball, I better than him or made the A squad team, I got beat for making the A squad. It was a tough road to go to school with him at the same time. It was my aunt's baby. My brother left home when I was 14. When I came home from school, he was gone. And I sat there and cried a long time because I knew I had to take over. I knew he had enough. He went to live with Clyde and Suzanne, heavy runner. We called them uncles and aunts. I didn't care anymore. I even started going outside to play regardless of the consequences. I didn't give a shit any longer, what they did to me. I can remember picking up on some of the vibes of them thinking they had lost control of me because I was not scared of them anymore. But something died in me when my brother left. With him gone, I didn't care anymore. We were so close, had laughed and cried and made it through the abuse together. It didn't seem to matter to me anymore with him gone. So I went outside to play one night to get a life, to try and feel real. Came back and did my chores, swept and mopped, laundry, dishes, you name it. All of the household chores. Like I said, I was a virtual slave. I remember I came in, I was about 15 at the time. I wasn't sure of the actual dates, but I heard my Aunt Aggie say to my Uncle Terry, he's leaving again. Boy, he got up and he hit me. He really beat me hard that night. He took a piece of those old ringer washer cords and beat me with it. So that night I sat in my room and I told myself I had enough. The next morning I walked to Browning. That's when I went into the welfare office. It's funny, I remember they asked me if I had a place to stay. So I went and I said, no, that's why I'm here. So I went and stayed with my Uncle Alvin. Then in the courtroom, my Uncle Alvin and Aunt Aggie were fighting over me. Not once did the judge look at me and ask, where do you want to go? Then I was sitting there in that damn place with these two people fighting over me. I didn't I didn't want to go with any of them. Alvin was ruthless, Aggie was ruthless, and I didn't want to live with any of them. I remember staying there and going with Alvin. The way he talked to the judge, it was all sunshine and roses. It was like, oh, he's gonna be a good boy, he'll have his own room, and we got all these things for him. It was like blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, right, whatever. I must have had been about a few days, and I remember getting my coat and ready to go outside and just do some stuff outside. His wife, Sarah, said she was mean also. She says, he's got his coat on again, meaning he was gonna go outside. Don't let him do it. I literally took off running out of the house and ran back to Star School from Browning and went to my cousin Muggy's. I remember going to school. A cop would come pick me up at the high school because I didn't have a place to go, and I'd have to go stay in a safe house. This was went on for about a month, and I remember this cop said to me, "I'll go park down the street on the road and out of sight, so I wouldn't have to come out and look so shameful getting into a cop car." It was in high school time, 14. I was 14, around 15, a freshman, and there was this young girl out there I started dating. Her name was Jonah, and she had brothers. They were all dating these girls from Star School, and Jatan and Carla. Well, they all knew I would meet the cop car. They knew my story, kind of, I guess. And their parents were on vacation in Seattle. They said to me, "Come stay with us." Their parents were were ranch and farmers. He was white and she was Blackfeet. A really good family, good people. Anyway, the kids said, "Stay with us for 2 or 3 weeks while our parents are gone." I remember we had to draw the curtains because we didn't want my aunt want Aggie to find me there. She was staying just up the road where we were staying. So I didn't go to school for those first couple of weeks. I just stayed home all day and the curtains drawn. But I remember Ruth and Almer got home from their vacation because it was like, oh shit, where do I go now? So I went outside across the street and I was playing on a basketball hoop and started playing ball with some friends. And Jatan and Carla said, "Well, we'll go talk to our parents and see if we can keep you." I just felt like a pet, you know. All I said was, "Oh, okay." So I was playing basketball with these kids across the street and their parents came out and they gave me a gift. And they said, "Okay, we're going to take a chance on you." And I was like, okay, it worked out. It felt strange, you know. I remember going in and staying there. And the next day we went into town. Ruth asked me if I had any clothes. And I said, "They're all up at Aggie's place." So I said, "Let's go find my dad." I knew he was drunk and on the streets. And I said, "He'll give me some money for clothes." She was surprised because he drank so much. She said, "Really?" And I said, "But he used to have this account through the land of lease money. He didn't always have money, but he would charge account at the local store at Fox." So I found my dad early that morning and I said, "Dad, I need clothes." He said, "Let's go into Fox." I remember he was really sick and hungover and he couldn't write his name. So I had to write his name for him. So we went into Fox. I got loaded up on clothes. I remember Ruth sitting back saying, "Really, he can do that for you?" Because she thought he was just a street drunk, and he was. But I got all these clothes and went back into the home. And I remember sleeping there and hearing every crack in that house and everything I want, everything I want that everything and the feelings were weird because I didn't know how to accept them. I used to have this philosophy that you had to accept them, and so that they would accept you. When I turned 18, I knew I had to leave because you're at that age and you know that you have to leave. It was tough being normal. It was tough for me to adjust to the fact that someone really cared about me. If I had homework and asked if I had homework or how I was feeling, it was tough for me in the atmosphere that someone really cared about me. Hey, hey, Oh, yeah, hi, no, hey, yeah, hey, hi, no, hey, hi, no, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Later, after joining the Navy, I came home on leave. I was about 19, possibly 20. And I was with my girlfriend and we were driving through Star School. I had not talked to my Aunt Aggie or my uncles, Alvin, Terry, and my cousin's baby since I was 14 years old when I left that house around 15 or 14. So I'm driving by and I look over and I see them all at the house at once. I didn't even think. I stopped the car and told my girlfriend, wait here. First thing I did is went into the house, went through my mind was that my Uncle Terry used to sit there and make me put my hands beside my hands down while he would hit me. And he was always telling me, when you get bigger, you come see me. And then there was there was Steve hanging me on the door, baby raking his fingers across my face, making scars on my face, and Aggie with all the shit she put me through. All of these memories were welling up, and I walked directly into the kitchen, and Aggie just looked at me and said, "What do you want?" I opened the drawer, found a knife, went to my Uncle Terry and handed it to him, saying, "You always wanted to stab people when I was growing up. Now it's going to be your fair fight." Because I remember he would always used to say, "I'm going to stab that son of a bitch." I start hitting him. He had open heart surgery, and I remember seeing the shirt open and hitting his scar, trying to break it open. Baby come running in with his little boy Riley. He was going to show me. He didn't realize what I had just be my uncle in that room. I said, "You son of a bitch, you look at my face. This is what you did to me." He got up so scared and jumped out the window with his boy and ran off. I was kicking holes in the wall. I took pictures of me, my dad, and my brother off the walls and turned to my Aunt Aggie and said, "Why in the fuck do you have these pictures up here? You shit on us. Why do you have these pictures of us?" I took the pictures of us and I couldn't find. I took the pictures and tried to find the ones that I could take off the wall that she had. And I told her, "If I hit a woman, I'd kill you right now." Then I took off and I chased baby. He ran across into a trailer house and everyone was sitting around watching TV like, "Whoa, what is going on here?" By then, my cousin Maui comes running up. He must have heard the ruckus. He must have heard the ruckus. He comes in there and says to the people in that trailer house, says to the people in the trailer house, "Where is he back?" They said he's in the back room back there. And they didn't even try to kick me out because they knew what they had done to me. So Maui went back there and took the baby, and I beat up my relative, my cousin. Later that evening, I was stopped by a policeman, and he said, "Irvin, when you heading back to your ship?" I said, "Tomorrow." He told me, "I didn't see you tonight. Get out of town. They're looking for you." So I went back. So when I got back to my ship in Seattle, Washington, man, I felt like shit. I got back to Seattle, and it was like one of the lowest feelings I ever felt because now I was the abuser. I didn't know what to do, but it really ate at me. So I sat down and wrote each of them a letter, an apology letter. But in that letter, I put everything that I thought they had did to me. I had a check sent to my Aunt Aggie for the walls I had put in her house. Since I didn't get the check back, I'm thinking she cashed it, but at least I apologized. I was late. I always wonder about what they had done with it and what they might have thought about the letters. I know my Aunt Aggie's, I know all my aunts and uncles know that their mom died in 1944 and my uncle Alvin was the baby. Aggie was the only girl of these brothers. My oldest uncles, Chicken Boy, Calvin, and Lois, my dad, were all very super nice. You couldn't ask for better people. But Terry, Alvin, Aggie, and Steve, I just don't know what got into them. They were the meanest people. My grandpa raised them. My Aunt Aggie was spoiled because she was the only girl, a backwards woman, really backwards. If you took a picture of her, she would get mad. But my Aunt Aggie was one of the meanest people. My dad was in and out of the house. There were 3 bedrooms. My Uncle Terry had his own room. My dad, my brother Keith, and I stayed in one room. Baby stayed with his mom, Aggie, in one. We had a wood cook stove and the kitchen and the living room, and the bigger and was the bigger and a living room with a bigger wood for heating the stove. bigger stove for heating the house. One time I almost burned down the house because I was tired and I got up that night and they kept asking me to put wood in. So I took some Presto blocks and I chopped them up and I put about 7 Presto blocks in the stove. And then when they were screaming and waking me up, the whole stove was bright red because I had put too much wood in there. But anyway, they never asked me to put wood in the stove again after that. When I graduated from Browning High School in 1985, I knew I had to leave Star School or the reservation. I took a piece of paper and I wrote down goals for Kevin Kickingwoman. One of them was to get married. I did, and I have a wonderful wife of 32 years. My second goal was to join the military. I joined the United States Navy with an honorable discharge. My third goal was to graduate college. I did, and I now have a BA and a master's. My fourth goal was to purchase my own house. I did, for my family, and then we have our own house. My fifth goal was to have 3 kids. Well, I have 7 kids. I have 5 children, and I adopted 2. And my sixth goal was to be right with the Creator, and I believe that's a daily thing, and I have faith that we're on the same page. Ultimately, my story is not about blame, shame, or hanging on to the ugliness of my father's past, but rather about what we have learned as a result of this and how we choose to move forward and move on. I understand my dad was an alcoholic and how he behaved in the ways that he did. As a result, my experiences, similar things and upbringing, it has taken most of my adult life to figure out what I have, that I do have a choice in how I want to be I want my life to be shaped. If I continue to hold grudges and blame and point the finger at the church and the government, the tribe for what happened to my dad and consequently myself, or I can choose to be a true Blackfeet warrior and seek to understand the process and move on. I can choose to continue learning about Blackfeet culture and know that there are ceremonies and practices in place that will help me heal my heart and rid myself of the blame that I carry. I know I must do this for myself and for my children so that they do not continue the negative cycle that my dad was in and that I sometimes fell into in the past. A true warrior will rise to the occasion and prevail in a positive manner. My dad lived in many times and many changes. I know that everything happens for a reason, and even though many of our people fell to alcoholism or other illnesses, I know that many of more not only survive, but also thrive. Blackfeet people are resilient. We continue to bounce back even through the roughest of times. I want to continue to learn, to grow, that I may continue a legacy of being a true Blackfeet warrior, so that I may be resilient and show in a good way for coming generations. I know that I can do this by practicing forgiveness, generosity, respect, and by being kind-hearted. By further softening my heart by praying and letting go of the past, by crying, laughing, fasting, and going to ceremonies and living a life that my dad and my ancestors intended and would be proud of. If I can only give what I have, and if all I have is to blame and have hard feelings in my heart, then that's all I have, and that's all I could give. I want to give people good things, a smile, hope, a hug, confidence, and I want to bring the best out of people and myself, because especially for my wife and my family and my children, I want to be a true Blackfeet warrior. Well, that's the story, guys. And with all the good luck that I ever had in my life, I give it to you all, because that's what life is about. It's a circumstance of luck that when we really bear down and we have to heal, it's up to us to, you have to honor your past. But my thing, I had to just keep going. I didn't have time to sit back and deal with a lot of things. And as I got older, I start finding counseling and help and so forth. And that's what I'm blessed today. I have a good family and good job and whatnot. And so I count my blessings. And every morning when I wake up, I pray that I'm with honest land one more time and with my family and so forth. So if the story helps you in any way, don't give up. Always try hard. So with that, I give you all the luck. I mean, if there's any questions, please ask or comments.
Thank you, Kevin. That was quite a journey that you took us on. So it really touched my heart. Thank you so much for that. Brenda is here with us, and she says, Brenda Johnson here, listening to your testimony, which you have shared with me before, we are reminded how important it is for babies and children to have nurturing homes. Some kids that experience this kind of trauma are able to overcome it for many different reasons, but others are not strong enough to go on and lead healthy and productive lives. That's from Brenda. So I am wondering, so as teachers are learning more about boarding schools and more about, teaching this, and there's so much that is obviously, potentially really difficult about this. Do you have any advice for how teachers might approach this topic and not be intimidated by it, because it is in the news. There's a lot of news going on, from Canada right now. And Carrie Gopher is our next presenter, and she is a Cree from Canada and went to boarding school. So she has a unique experience that she'll be sharing in 2 weeks. Do you have any advice for teachers to approach this topic?
You just got to hit it head on. I think that don't skirt around the issues. Too often we skirt around issues, and my thing is you hit it head on. Make sure you're compassionate, and let it out there what kids are going to heal: the sexual, physical, emotional, spiritual abuse that we went through, and that a lot of kids wonder why are we here on the reservations, especially why are we struggling. And I always tell kids, from our past, what we have happened to us. But I also talked about, I asked my uncle one time, Clyde Heberner, and I said, man, we just seem in turmoil all the time. Why? And he told me, and I like what he said. He said, because we quit dreaming. And so my thing is that hit things on straight on, and we need to start dreaming again. And because a lot of our ways and songs are from this, and we got to help heal from our past. And that's a tough thing to say, because young people don't understand. It's hard for them to grasp and understand. It's such a big topic and concept of what we went through. So, but my thing is just hit it head on, and explain that it is up to them to change the narrative. And that's what I would say,
Thank you. The next comment is, thank you. You are a miracle to have gotten through and to be able to share with all of us. How amazing. Thank you for your choices and where they have brought you. The next one is, Kevin, thank you so much for your words. I am so happy that you are on a great journey today. Many blessings to you and your family. The next one includes a question as well. You're a true warrior. Is your story going to be published, and when?
It is published. It's published in the Yellow Medicine Review. And it's like the 2018 edition. So it is published, but I was working on a book that I want to do the whole story. It's kind of crazy. I still have one of the relatives that really did a lot to us is still alive, and I just don't want to do it while he's alive. I don't know. It's just me. And like someone said, well, they didn't care when he was a kid, but that's just me. So I don't know. I wrestle with that. And I like to say, I don't do the story in Browning. I just don't do it.
Well, back to Browning, Brenda has another comment. Kevin, I always feel so good when you give a prayer for everyone. I concur with that sentiment. So I thank you for the prayer at the beginning. Can you share with the audience how your story helps students? I read a post on Facebook from a young lady, a former student, and it sounded like she thought suicide was a way out, but she would never do it. Some of our kids are too young to realize that time is a great healer as we gain life experience and we grow wiser. So how can you share with your audience how your story helps students was the question.
Wow, the kids here, when I have a lot that open up to me, and we have a really good, sincere talk about perhaps what they're going through. And when I start telling them like what I've been through, and they're like, wow. And sometimes I'll just hand the book to them and say, I want you to read this. And they come back with a whole different perspective. Like, if you can do it, I can do it. And that's what I tell them. If I can do it, you can do it. And I said, sometimes it's sad to say, you just have to bear down. You just have to deal with it because there's light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to turn 18. You're going to leave the reservation, go to school, go to the military, do what you do to get away from here. And that's what my thing is. And, it's hard, but at the same time, you can do it, but it's got to really get after it. I don't know how else to say it, that you got to have everything of your fiber just to want to make it and get after it. And that's what I did. From, not even knowing where I'm going to go next night, to sleeping under a trailer, to, I just dreamed. I dreamed. And like I say, just watching the sun come up in the morning and setting at night, I made it one more day. And so I know that that's what I tell the kids, that, I can help them. I had one kid one time years ago came in, and his father had committed suicide. And he came in and he literally told me that night, he said, I'm going to do it. And the way his dad did it, it was with a gun. And man, we had a good talk, and I walked him down to the counselors, and today he comes up and he thanks me. He's a good dad, and he's doing well, and college graduate and whatnot. And he says, it wasn't for you. So those type of things, that knowing that whatever you planted or seed within them, that it's still growing. That's what means to me. That's what keeps me going, because don't believe me, guys, I have my own anxiety. I have my own times, but I realize that, I don't know, it's just me. I ain't got time to hurt, although I do. It just seems like there's more out there, because I'm so appreciative about life. Because when I take an inventory at the end of the day, some of the things we go through are trivial. But they add up, But at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm all right. Because sometimes I call upon that little boy back then, and I always say, what would that little boy do? You know what he'd say? Get after it, man. What's wrong with you? Because he didn't have choices then. I have choices now. And so I always say, that little boy would say, get after it. What's wrong with you? But that's just me.
That's beautiful. I know, excuse me, someone who loves you, Amanda Walking Child. She says, many blessings to you, brother. You are blessed and have a beautiful family. The next comment is, thank you for sharing. You are an amazing human. One of my colleagues says, Mr. Kevin, you are an incredible man. Thank you for the courage to share your story. It is a privilege to be with you this afternoon and learn from a warrior. Another teacher says, I am so glad you made it out of that situation, and you are a stronger person for it and a great warrior. Another person says, I want to say a thank you for your vulnerability and humility in sharing your story. And someone did find the Yellow Medicine review store, and so they've published the link in chat. And nice. Another person says, thank you so much for sharing your story. And Kevin, I've had the privilege of spending some time with you, and without knowing all of the details of this story, I knew that you had been through a lot, but the fact that what is touching my heart right now is the fact that, you sang me an honor song, and that feels so humbling at this moment, that you saw something in me, and all I see in you is just like, wow, I know the work that you've been doing, and I know the work that you are doing, and it is so tremendous, which is why you're here. And I was so excited that you had agreed. But we would like to offer you something. Mike Jetty is with us here tonight, and would you be open to him offering you an honor song and a healing song?
I'd be honored.
Awesome. Awesome. So Mike Jetty, let me make sure you have all the right permissions here so you can, let's see, you are now co-host Mike Jetty, so you should be able to unmute and put your camera on. And I'm so glad that we're able to offer this to you.
I gotta
Here
change
comes
my
Mike Jetty.
background here.
Yeah, he's on the Enterprise.
Also Star Trek there for a second. So, Kevin, thank you so much for what you shared today. That was powerful.
Mm.
I think more people need to hear that kind of story, though. Because it's real. And so Jennifer, she sent me a note asking if I'd offer up a song. I started out today singing a song for a group of folks, and so I really appreciated you sharing your songs. That's powerful. And so with that, I just thought I'd, for everybody on here, just to kind of close it out, sing a sweat song for healing. And it says, "Grandfather, I'm having a hard time. Help me. I'm sending my voice." And so it's just a real simple song, but it's one of our, older sweat songs.
Yeah.
And, it's good for any situation, but for, I was thinking about something here for, the folks out there that are still having a hard time, but, just for you sharing your story. Holy mackerel. So I'll offer that up here for everyone, and to thank you, for all the things you do up there for the Amskapi, Pakani, Exikapi,
Exikapi.
Hatum Kashila, Wambli Isnala Mielo, Rowan Kile. So offer up this prayer song. Kunka Shela Wakatanka. Aya oye wayelo, wonka shela wakatanka. Aya oye wayelo, wonka shela o makiayo makakidero ay. Wonka shela wakatanka. Shela wakatanga aya wayelo shela o makiayo makakiyero. That's just a song for anybody out there needing a little help, having a hard time. And so thank you, Kevin. Out there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Yeah, so deserving, Kevin. Thank you so much for being so real and vulnerable, and yet, using that metal to help the youth and to help us understand, the implications of losing that connectivity, from the boarding school era.
And I think that one of the things I'd like to say is, when you're talking about connectivity and interconnected, and I tell these kids about this energy that we have out here, and I think it's important to let the audience know that every morning when we get up, there's a lot of things we do when we get up for the sun, and we embrace the sun, not deuce. And one of the things we ask for is the peaks, the above beings, the sun, the moon, and everything, the stars, Kakadusi, Mahapakwiks, Iskachikika makes the seven brothers, all these beings in this world we're DNA with. We ask them for help, those beings. Then we talk about the sweet, the peaks, everything under the water, the otter, the beaver, the algae, everything that consists under the water, rivers, streams, you name it. Then the Sakhamita, the peaks, these earth beings, everything is connected. Everything that has life, everything. And that means the humans, the birds, the grass, the rocks, everything. And not to eat the peaks, those spirit beings that are out there, that my dad and my mom and all them that crossed over the other side, those beings. In Blackfoot, we say Kakioksan. and through Gakyok's and Inishtabat to be up the source of life of everything is connected. When we call upon these beings, Gakyok's aligns us with these beings. And with those beings, we find what we call Matakpi, the human being. And I think that's what keeps me rolling every day because of the energy that's here, the unseen things that people try to describe, but we as Native people know that the energy spirit, and that's what we have here. And I tell the kids, have a good spirit, people will see that. And so that's what I try to convey, that good energy will help you, so.
I love that so much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that teaching. That's an important teaching. Well, everyone, this was quite the session. And what I would like to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And Kevin, if you need to leave, I totally understand. If anybody else needs to leave, I totally understand. But if anybody would like to stay on and do any processing or anything that you might need, I will definitely stay on for a few minutes to make sure that we can do that. And otherwise, we'll see you back in 2 weeks for Carrie